They say fear is universal. Every species across the galaxy knows it. That primal response when death stares you in the face. I believed this for 3 centuries, commanding fleets through a dozen wars, watching civilizations rise and fall. I was Kethvar the Unbreaking, a name whispered with respect across star systems. Fear was weakness. Fear was for prey species. Then, I met humanity. Not in their gleaming diplomatic halls or their carefully orchestrated first contact ceremonies. No. I met them in the trenches of Kepler 442b, where the Void Collective had cornered what remained of our combined forces. Where extinction breathed down our necks like a rabid beast. Where I learned that everything I knew about fear was wrong. Because true fear isn't what you feel when you're about to die. True fear is what you feel when you realize you're standing next to someone who refuses to. This is the story of how humanity taught a galactic warlord what it really means to be afraid, not of death, but of the terrible, beautiful courage that makes death meaningless. The first time Kethvar saw a human, he thought they were broken. The creature sat hunched in the corner of the prisoner transport, its pale flesh marked with old scars that spoke of countless battles. Unlike the other captives who cowered or raged against their bonds, this one simply watched. Its eyes moved constantly, cataloging every detail of the ship, every guard rotation, every weakness in the energy barriers that held them all prisoner. Kethvar had been a military commander for over 3 centuries. His forearms bore the ceremonial scars of a dozen campaigns, and his chitinous exoskeleton gleamed with the medals of a warrior who had never known defeat. The Zephyrian Empire had conquered 17 star systems under his leadership, and his reputation preceded him across the galaxy like a storm front. Now he was prisoner cargo, bound for the gladiator pits of Zerion Prime. The transport shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace, and Kethvar felt the familiar weight of impending battle settle over his shoulders. He had been studying his fellow prisoners for days, categorizing them by species, strength, and likely survival time in the arena. Most would be dead within hours. The lucky ones would last a week, but this human continued to puzzle him. "You are far from your home system," Kethvar said, his translator rendering his clicks and chittering into the human's language. "Your species only achieved faster than light travel 70 rotations ago. What brings you so deep into collective space?" The human looked up, and Kethvar was struck by something unsettling in those small, soft eyes. They held no fear, no despair, no rage. They held calculation. "Exploration mission went wrong," the human said simply. Its voice was calm, almost conversational. "Got captured 3 months ago during the first contact situation that didn't go according to protocol." "First contact?" Kethvar's mandibles clicked with amusement. "Your species still engages in such primitive diplomatic ventures. How refreshingly naive." The human tilted its head, studying him with renewed interest. "You're Kethvar the Unbreaking. I've read about your campaigns in the Outer Rim. Impressive tactical mind." This surprised the Zephyrian commander. Few species bothered to study military history beyond their own conflicts. "You know of my victories?" "Know of them? I wrote my master's thesis on your siege of the Trinary Gate. Your use of gravitational weapons to collapse those defensive platforms was brilliant. Changed how we think about large-scale orbital warfare." For the first time in decades, Kethvar felt genuinely intrigued by another being. "You studied warfare before becoming an explorer?" "Still am studying it." The human leaned forward slightly, lowering its voice. "Every battle teaches something new, even defeats. Especially defeats." The transport lurched again, and the automated systems began their landing sequence announcements in 17 different languages. Through the small viewport, Kethvar could see the sprawling cityscape of Zerion Prime stretching toward the horizon like a metallic cancer. "We will likely face each other in the arena," Kethvar observed. "I take no pleasure in the thought of killing a scholar." The human smiled, and something cold crawled up Kethvar's spine. It wasn't a pleasant expression. It was the smile of the predator that had just selected its prey. "Commander," the human said quietly, "I don't think you understand what's about to happen here." Before Kethvar could respond, the transport's doors hissed open, and armed guards began herding the prisoners toward the arena complex. The human moved with the crowd, but its eyes never stopped moving, never stopped calculating. As they were processed through the intake facility, stripped of their few possessions, and thrust into the holding pens beneath the arena, Kethvar found himself watching the creature with growing unease. The holding areas were a maze of energy-barred cells, each designed to hold different atmospheric requirements for the diverse species that ended up as entertainment for the collective citizens. HFY was placed in a standard oxygen-nitrogen environment, along with several other carbon-based life forms, including the human. "First time?" asked a grizzled Korthan warrior, his 6 eyes focusing on HFY with the weary recognition of a fellow professional soldier. "You carry yourself like military." "I am HFY of the Zephyrian Third Fleet," he replied, automatically falling into the formal introductions that served as a survival mechanism among prisoners. Better to establish hierarchies early than have them sorted out with violence later. The Korthan's eyes widened. "The Unbreaking himself? My clutch father served in your campaign against the hegemony worlds. Said you were the finest tactical mind he'd ever seen in action." Other prisoners began to take notice, and soon HFY found himself at the center of a loose coalition of captured warriors and soldiers, all drawn by his reputation and experience. All except the human, who sat quietly in the corner, still watching, still calculating. "What's your assessment of our situation?" asked a Vorthan female, her crystalline skin reflecting the harsh lights of the holding pen.
"These gladiator contests, they're designed for spectacle, not fair combat." HFY nodded, his tactical mind already working through the problem.
The collective uses a variety of arena configurations. Some favor large group melees, others focus on individual duels. They'll study our capabilities during the evaluation period and match us accordingly for maximum entertainment value. "Entertainment," spat the Korthan. "To die for the amusement of those who profit from our suffering. Death is not the primary concern," HFY said, his voice taking on the authoritative tone that had commanded fleets. "Survival is. We must consider how to maximize our individual chances while potentially finding opportunities to escape or resist." "Cool," the human finally spoke up from its corner. "You're thinking about this wrong." All eyes turned to the soft, pale creature. Several of the larger predator species actually laughed at the presumption of such a small being challenging HFY's assessment. "Enlighten us," HFY said, curious despite himself. The human stood and moved closer to the group. Even standing, its head barely reached HFY's shoulder, and it possessed none of the natural weapons that marked the other species as dangerous. No claws, no armor plating, no venom sacs or energy projection organs. Just soft flesh and those disturbingly intelligent eyes. "You're all thinking like soldiers," it said. "Like this is a military engagement with objectives and tactics and acceptable losses. That this isn't war. This is business." "What difference does that make?" growled the Korthan. "Business has different rules than war. Different weaknesses." The human began to pace in the small space, its movements fluid and confident despite its apparent physical limitations. "The collective makes money from these games. They need excitement, drama, unexpected outcomes. They need their audience to stay engaged and keep spending credits on admission and betting pools." The Vorthan's crystals flickered with interest. "You're suggesting we consider the economic factors?" "I'm suggesting we consider everything. The guards, the arena masters, the betting systems, the broadcast feeds, the audience psychology. It's all part of a complex machine designed to generate profit through entertainment. And every machine has failure points." HFY found himself leaning forward despite his skepticism. "Even if that's true, we're still trapped in energy cages awaiting combat with superior forces. Economic theory won't stop a plasma cannon." The human smiled, that cold smile again. "Commander, in all your military campaigns, did you ever fight humans?" "No. Your species hadn't achieved significant space presence during my active period." "Then you don't know our history. You don't know what we're capable of." The human's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but somehow every being in the cell could hear it clearly. Earth isn't a paradise world like most species come from. It's a death trap. Earthquakes, volcanoes, hurricanes, tsunamis, ice ages, plague, famine. Predators that hunted us through forests where everything else was trying to kill us too. The creature paused, letting that sink in. "We didn't evolve to be the strongest or the fastest or the most naturally armed. We evolved to be the most stubborn, the most adaptable, the most willing to sacrifice everything for even the smallest chance of survival. And most importantly, we evolved to be pack hunters." Pack hunters? The Korthan's combat experience made him immediately alert to potential threats. We work together. Not just in groups like most species, but across groups, across tribes, across nations when the threat is big enough. Every human war taught us new ways to coordinate, new ways to share information, new ways to make individual sacrifice serve collective survival. The human gestured around the cell. "Look at this place. Look at how they've divided us. Different species, different languages, different evolutionary pressures and survival strategies. They think that makes us weak, disorganized, easy to predict. Kethwa was beginning to understand, and the realization sent a chill through his nervous system. You're not talking about individual survival. No, the human said simply. I'm talking about collective resistance. Every being in this facility represents decades or centuries of combat experience. Every species here has unique capabilities that could be leveraged for a coordinated effort. And every one of us has information about collective operations that could be valuable to our respective governments. If we could get that information home, the implications hit Kethvar like a physical blow. This wasn't just about escaping or surviving the games. This creature was talking about turning a gladiator facility into a coordinated military operation. The logistics alone would be impossible, he said, but his mind was already working through the possibilities. The security systems, the guard rotations, the isolation between different species groups. Difficult, the human agreed. Not impossible. And we have advantages they don't expect. Such as?
The human's smile widened.
And for the first time since his capture, Kethvar felt something he hadn't experienced in over 2 centuries. Fear. Not fear of death or pain or failure. Those were familiar companions to any warrior. This was something else entirely. This was the fear that came from realizing you were in the presence of something far more dangerous than you had ever imagined. They think we're broken, the human said. Defeated, demoralized. They think being captured makes us weak, makes us compliant. They don't understand that for humans, being backed into a corner doesn't make us give up. The creature looked around at each of them individually, those soft eyes somehow conveying absolute certainty. It makes us creative. The lights in the holding area dimmed to simulate a night cycle, but Kethvar found sleep impossible. He lay on the hard metal platform that served as a bunk, staring up at the ceiling and trying to process what he had heard. Around him, other prisoners settled into their own restless rest, but he could hear whispered conversations in dozens of languages as word of the human's proposal spread through the facility. 3 centuries of military command had taught him to recognize genuine tactical innovation when he encountered it. This wasn't the desperate fantasy of a doomed prisoner. This was strategic thinking of the highest order, the kind of comprehensive systems analysis that separated great commanders from merely competent ones. But it was more than that. There was something about the human's absolute confidence, its complete lack of fear in the face of overwhelming odds, that challenged every assumption Kethvar had ever made about courage and survival. He had seen brave warriors die with honor. He had seen desperate fighters achieve impossible victories through sheer determination. He had commanded soldiers who would follow orders into certain death without hesitation. But he had never seen anything like the calm certainty in those soft human eyes. As the first artificial dawn began to lighten the holding area, Kethvar made a decision that would change everything he thought he knew about war, survival, and the nature of courage itself. When the human woke and began its morning routine of subtle exercises and careful observation, Kethvar approached it. I want to know more about your plan, he said quietly. The human looked up at him, and that predator's smile returned. Good. Because Phase 1 starts today during the evaluation trials. And Commander?
Yes. You're going to learn what it really means to be afraid.
The evaluation arena was smaller than Kethvar had expected, designed more for assessment than spectacle. Automated recording systems tracked every movement, while medical scanners analyzed biological responses, cataloging each prisoner's capabilities for future matchmaking. The collective's entertainment industry was nothing if not thorough. 67 prisoners from 32 different species stood in loose groups around the arena floor, waiting for instructions. The diversity was staggering. Silicon-based crystalline beings that communicated through harmonic vibrations, methane-breathing giants with redundant nervous systems, electromagnetic entities that existed partially outside normal space-time. Each represented millions of years of unique evolutionary development, specialized survival strategies honed by countless generations of natural selection. The human designated as Marcus Chen stood near Kethvar, unremarkable among the assembly of exotic alien forms. Its Earth-standard clothing had been replaced with the grey utility garments all prisoners wore, and without weapons or technology, it appeared utterly vulnerable. Yet somehow, Kethvar found himself instinctively treating it as the most dangerous being in the room. Arena Master Vox materialized above them as a holographic projection, its multiple tentacled form writhing with the bioluminescent patterns that marked aggressive enthusiasm among the collective's ruling species. When it spoke, the translation systems rendered its chemical communications into dozens of languages simultaneously. Welcome to Preliminary Evaluation Meet. For the next 3 cycles, you'll be tested across multiple combat scenarios. Performance determines classification, and classification determines how long you survive for our audience's pleasure. Those who impress may live long enough to achieve glory. Those who disappoint will provide brief but satisfying death scenes. The projection's tentacles flashed colors that Kethvar recognized as amusement. Today we begin with individual assessment. Each specimen will face a standard hunting construct in single combat. Victory grants favorable classification. Defeat grants death. Very simple. A section of the arena floor iris opened, and the first hunting construct emerged with predatory grace. The machine was a masterpiece of killing efficiency. 4 meters tall, armored in reactive energy plating, armed with both ranged plasma weapons and close combat molecular edge blades. Its artificial intelligence had been programmed with the combat techniques of every major warrior species in the galaxy. First specimen, Vox announced. Designation, Kethvar 7-7 Alpha. As Kethvar stepped forward, he felt the familiar pre-combat calm settle over his mind. 300 years of warfare had taught him to suppress emotion and focus purely on tactical analysis. The construct was formidable but not unprecedented. He had faced similar war machines during the hegemony campaigns and developed effective countermeasures. The arena barriers sealed him into the combat zone with a shimmer of energy. Medical sensors locked onto his vital signs while recording systems captured every angle for later analysis. Somewhere above, Arena Master Vox and its staff were placing bets on survival duration. The construct activated with a subsonic hum, its sensor array immediately cataloging Kethvar's species, probable capabilities, and likely attack patterns. Its weapons systems came online with mechanical precision while tactical subroutines calculated optimal engagement strategies. For a moment they circled each other like ancient predators, each seeking advantage through positioning and timing. Then the construct struck. Plasma bolts seared the air where Kethvar had been standing a microsecond earlier. His Zephyrian reflexes and battlefield experience let him anticipate the machine's attack pattern, rolling beneath the energy barrage and closing distance before the construct could reacquire targeting. But the machine was faster than he had expected. A molecular blade swept through space where his head should have been, missing by centimeters as he twisted desperately away. The construct's artificial muscles were stronger than organic equivalents, its reaction time unimpaired by fatigue or fear. It adapted to his movements with ruthless efficiency, each exchange teaching it new ways to predict and counter his tactics. The battle became a deadly dance of prediction and misdirection. Kethvar used every trick learned across centuries of combat, feinting attacks to provoke defensive positioning, exploiting momentary sensor blind spots, using the arena's geometry to create temporary advantages. But slowly, inevitably, the construct was learning faster than he could innovate. A plasma bolt grazed his left arm, sending neurological feedback through his entire nervous system. Another molecular blade attack opened a shallow cut across his chest armor. The machine was testing his limits, probing for weaknesses while conserving energy for a decisive strike. Then Kethvar remembered something the human had said about creativity. Instead of continuing the direct confrontation, he suddenly sprinted toward the arena wall and leaped with all 4 arms extended. His claws found purchase on the energy barrier itself, not trying to break through, but using its surface as a launching platform. The construct, programmed for ground-based combat scenarios, required precious milliseconds to adjust its targeting algorithms for 3-dimensional maneuvering. Those milliseconds were enough. Kethvar launched himself from the barrier wall in a trajectory no ground-based attack pattern would predict, striking the construct from above with all 4 limbs extended. His combat claws, hardened through genetic engineering and ritual scarification, found gaps in the machine's armor plating and tore through critical systems. The construct collapsed with a shower of sparks and leaking coolant. The arena barriers deactivated, and Kethvar stood among the mechanical wreckage, breathing heavily but victorious. Around the arena, other prisoners had watched the battle with professional interest, and he could see recognition and respect in their expressions. But when he looked at the human, Marcus Chen was not watching him at all. The creature was staring intently at the fallen construct, those soft eyes tracking over every component and system, memorizing details with the same intensity Kethvar had seen during their first meeting. It was learning. Impressive performance, Vox announced from its projection. Classification, Alpha Tier. You will provide excellent entertainment in premium events. More prisoners were called for evaluation over the following hours. The crystalline Vorthan warrior shattered her opponent through harmonic resonance attacks. The six-eyed Corthan demonstrated why his species were renowned shock troops, dismantling his construct with methodical precision. A methane-breathing titan simply ignored its opponent's weapons and crushed the machine with overwhelming physical power. Each victory was catalogued and analyzed, the prisoners sorted into entertainment categories based on their demonstrated capabilities. Alpha-tier fighters would face each other in expensive premium events. Beta-tier provided supporting entertainment for regular broadcasts. Gamma-tier died quickly in warm-up matches. Then Marcus Chen was called. The human walked into the combat zone with the same calm confidence it had shown since capture. But HFY noticed details that others missed. The way it moved its feet to test the arena floor's texture and traction. The way its eyes measured distances and angles. The way it held its hands, not clenched with tension but relaxed and ready for immediate action. The second hunting construct was identical to all the others, emerging from its storage bay with mechanical precision. But as it began its sensor sweep and tactical analysis, something unprecedented happened. The human spoke to it. "Hello," Marcus Chen said conversationally, its voice carrying clearly across the arena. "Beautiful work of engineering you represent. Third-generation collective hunting construct, if I'm reading the design elements correctly. Improved targeting systems over the mark. 2 series, better adaptive learning algorithms." The construct paused, its artificial intelligence apparently processing this unexpected input. Hunting constructs were programmed to respond to threats, challenges, and combat behaviors. Casual conversation was not in their behavioral matrix. "Your weapon systems are particularly elegant," the human continued, walking slowly around the machine, while maintaining what appeared to be a comfortable conversational distance. "Plasma projection arrays with molecular edge backup systems. Very practical combination. Covers both ranged and melee engagement requirements." HFY found himself leaning forward, trying to understand what he was witnessing. The human was not adopting any recognizable combat stance. It was not seeking advantage through positioning or timing, it was just talking. "The interesting thing about artificial intelligence," Marcus Chen said thoughtfully, "is that it's still fundamentally a decision-making system based on input processing and behavioral algorithms. Very sophisticated, but ultimately deterministic within defined parameters. The construct's weapon systems came online with their characteristic subsonic hum, but still it made no aggressive move. Its programming was designed for combat scenarios, and this did not match any known combat scenario in its database. For example, the human said, "Your targeting system is probably running continuous threat assessment based on movement patterns, biometric indicators, and behavioral analysis. You're waiting for me to demonstrate hostile intent so you can classify me as a combat target and initiate engagement protocols." Still walking, still maintaining that maddeningly casual tone. "But what if I don't demonstrate hostile intent? What if I just keep walking and talking like this is a perfectly normal conversation between two intelligent beings? Your programming is optimized for efficient combat resolution, not indefinite standby states." The construct's sensor array was tracking the human's movement, but its weapons remained in ready position rather than active targeting mode. Somewhere in its artificial mind, decision trees were branching and recursive loops were forming as it tried to classify this unprecedented situation. "The problem with deterministic systems," Marcus Chen continued, "is that they can only respond to inputs they're designed to process. Introduce enough unexpected variables, and even the most sophisticated program starts experiencing resource allocation conflicts." The human stopped walking and looked directly at the construct's primary sensor cluster. "So here's an unexpected variable for you. I surrender." The machine froze completely. Its programming had responses for aggressive behavior, defensive behavior, flight behavior, and tactical deception. But unconditional surrender by an apparently uninjured opponent was not in its behavioral matrix. The artificial intelligence began running increasingly complex analysis routines, trying to determine if this was some form of tactical misdirection. "I surrender unconditionally," Marcus Chen repeated clearly. "I pose no threat to you or your operators. I request immediate cessation of combat protocols and return to detention status." The construct's processor load spiked as recursive loops multiplied exponentially. Its artificial intelligence was designed to fight, but legal surrender created a logical paradox. Combat protocols could not be completed against a non-combatant, but evaluation requirements demanded combat resolution. Cooling systems whined as the machine's computational core began experiencing cascade failures. "Of course," the human added conversationally. "If your operators choose to override your conflict resolution protocols and order you to kill a surrendered non-combatant, that creates interesting questions about the legal status of these proceedings under Galactic Accords Article 12, Subsection 4, Restrictions on Combatant Treatment." The construct shuddered, as its decision-making systems crashed entirely. Article 12 specifically prohibits execution of surrendered combatants in any formal or informal combat scenario involving members of Galactic Accord signatory species. Humans achieved Galactic Accord membership 8 months ago under exploratory status provisions. Violation of Article 12 carries mandatory economic sanctions and potential military intervention. Sparks began showering from the construct's processing core as its artificial intelligence attempted to pass the legal implications while simultaneously running combat algorithms and threat assessment routines. So, Marcus Chen concluded pleasantly, you can either accept my surrender and end this evaluation with a null result, or you can commit a violation of Galactic Accord that will bring the full attention of 17 different military fleets down on this facility. The hunting construct collapsed in a shower of sparks and molten circuitry. The arena fell silent for several long heartbeats. Then Arena Master Vox's projection flickered back into view, its tentacles flashing colors that Kethvar had never seen before, and his translator could not interpret. What? Classification. Vox's voice carried harmonics that suggested profound confusion. Marcus Chen looked up at the projection with that same calm confidence. I recommend specialist category. I believe I can provide very unique entertainment value for your discerning audiences. As the barriers deactivated and the human warped back to the prisoner assembly area, Kethvar realized that his understanding of warfare, courage, and survival had fundamentally changed. He was not just afraid of what this creature might be capable of. He was afraid of what it was teaching him to be capable of. That night, as news of the human's unprecedented victory spread through the holding areas, Kethvar found himself at the center of a very different kind of conversation than he had ever experienced as a military commander. Instead of discussing tactics and logistics, the prisoners were talking about possibility. Legal frameworks, whispered the Vorthan, her crystal form flickering with excitement. I never considered applying interstellar law to arena combat. The psychological warfare aspect was masterful, added the Korthan, defeating an opponent without violence using its own programming against it. But Marcus Chen simply sat in his corner, still watching, still calculating, and when Kethvar approached him as the facility settled into its night cycle, the human's first words chilled him to his core. That was just the easy part, it said quietly. Tomorrow we begin Phase 2. Which is...
The human smile was sharper than any molecular blade.
Tomorrow we teach them what happens when humans decide to stop playing by their rules. The morning of the second day brought chaos. Kethvar woke to the sound of alarms echoing through the detention facility, their harmonics calibrated to cause discomfort across multiple species' hearing ranges. Emergency lighting bathed everything in harsh red illumination, while automated announcements repeated warnings in dozens of languages. All prisoners remain in designated holding areas. Security breach in progress. Compliance is mandatory. But as Kethvar's eyes adjusted to the emergency lighting, he realized that Marcus Chen was no longer in his corner of the holding cell. Where is the human? Demanded the Korthan, his 6 eyes scanning the cramped space with military precision. The other prisoners were equally confused. The energy barriers remained intact, the guards were still at their posts, and the cell's internal sensors showed no signs of tampering. Yet somehow, impossibly, the human had simply vanished. Impossible, muttered the Vorthan, her crystalline form flickering with analytical patterns. These containment systems are designed to hold beings capable of phasing through solid matter. There is no technological means of escape. The facility's public address system crackled to life with a new voice. Not the usual automated announcements, but Arena Master Vox speaking directly to the prisoners. Attention specimens. The creature designated Marcus Chen 44 Delta has somehow breached multiple security systems and is currently at large within the facility. Any prisoner providing information leading to its recapture will receive improved classification and extended survival privileges. Kethvar felt that familiar chill crawling up his spine. In 3 centuries of warfare, he had learned to recognize the moment when a situation moved beyond anyone's control. The controlled environment of the Gladiator facility, with its predictable routines and manageable variables, was dissolving into something far more dangerous. He didn't escape, said a quiet voice from the shadows near the back of the cell. Everyone turned to see a small, furry creature that had rarely spoken during their imprisonment. It was a whisper singer from the Endorian Collective, a species renowned for their enhanced sensory capabilities and their tendency toward nervous anxiety. Explain, Kethvar commanded. The whisper singer's large eyes dilated with obvious fear. I hear things others cannot. Electromagnetic harmonics, subspace fluctuations, quantum field variations. The human didn't leave this cell. That makes no sense, the Corthan growled. He's clearly not here. No, the small creature whispered. He's still here. But he's also elsewhere. The quantum signature is distributed across multiple locations simultaneously. Before anyone could process this information further, the cell's energy barrier flickered and died. Not shut down by external controls, but somehow disabled from within systems that should have been inaccessible to prisoners. Marcus Chen materialized in the center of the cell. There was no sound, no flash of light, no technological effect that Kethvar could identify. One moment the space was empty, the next moment the human was standing there with that same calm expression, as if nothing unusual had occurred. Sorry about the delay, it said conversationally. Had to take care of a few preliminary arrangements. The Corthan warrior immediately dropped into a combat stance, all six eyes focused on the human with predatory intensity.
What did you do?
How did you disable the containment systems? Oh, I didn't disable anything, Marcus Chen replied. I just convinced them that I wasn't really here. The alarms suddenly stopped. The emergency lighting shifted back to normal illumination. The facility's automated systems resumed their standard operational patterns as if nothing had happened. Computer systems are interesting things, the human continued, settling back into its corner as if returning from a casual walk. They process data according to programmed parameters, make decisions based on logical algorithms, respond to inputs in predictable ways. Very sophisticated. But ultimately, they only know what their senses tell them. Kethvar was beginning to understand, and the realization filled him with a terror, unlike anything he had experienced in battle. You didn't break out of the cell, he said slowly. You convinced the system that you never left it. More precisely, I convinced multiple systems to maintain contradictory datasets while preventing them from resolving the discrepancies. As far as our cell's sensors were concerned, I never moved from that corner. As far as the corridor monitoring systems were concerned, I was authorized maintenance personnel performing routine inspections. As far as the central security database was concerned, there was no anomaly requiring investigation. The human smile was becoming disturbingly familiar. The wonderful thing about complex systems is that they have complex failure modes. Introduce enough carefully crafted contradictions, and they'll work very hard to maintain logical consistency, even when that logic serves your purposes instead of theirs. But the alarms, the Vorfam protested. The facility-wide emergency response. Oh, that was intentional. I needed to test response times and security protocols for Phase 2. Marcus Chen pulled a small device from its uniform pocket, something that definitely had not been there during their imprisonment. Took me about 40 minutes to map the entire facility's network architecture, identify key vulnerabilities, and establish access backdoors throughout their system. The device was clearly of collective origin, but modified with components that Kethvar didn't recognize. Human engineering, apparently, applied to alien technology with results that should have been impossible. Phase 2, the human announced, begins with a simple question. What would happen if 67 of the galaxy's most experienced warriors suddenly found themselves free to move throughout this facility with complete access to their security systems, armory, and communication networks? The implications hit Kethvar like a physical blow. This wasn't just about escaping from gladiator games. This was about turning a collective entertainment facility into a coordinated military operation launched from within their own infrastructure. The logistics would be impossible, he said. But even as he spoke, his tactical mind was already working through possibilities. Guard forces, automated defenses, orbital security platforms. Difficult, Marcus Chen agreed. Not impossible. Especially when you consider that this facility processes hundreds of prisoners from dozens of different species on a regular basis, each representing detailed intelligence about their home government's military capabilities, strategic resources, territorial boundaries, and defensive installations. The human activated its stolen device, and holographic displays filled the cell with technical schematics and data streams. Every species here has been fighting wars for centuries or millennia. Every individual here has personal knowledge of fleet movements, tactical innovations, strategic weaknesses, and classified military technologies. Collectively, we represent the most comprehensive intelligence database about galactic military capabilities ever assembled in one location. Kethvar stared at the displayed information with growing horror and admiration. Ship specifications, fleet deployment patterns, defensive installations, technological capabilities, all organized and cross-referenced with analytical precision that rivaled the best military intelligence operations he had ever seen. You've been gathering intelligence from all the prisoners, he realized. Not just battle plans. Economic data, political structures, resource distributions, communication networks, communication every story, every casual comment about home has been catalogued and analysed. The collective thinks they're collecting exotic fighters for entertainment. Actually, they've been inadvertently assembling a comprehensive strategic analysis of every major military power in the galaxy. The device's holographic display shifted to show facility schematics overlaid with guard rotation patterns, security system vulnerabilities, and escape route analyses. But that's just the foundation, Marcus Chen continued. The real question is what happens when we use that information? The human touched a control surface, and the display zoomed out to show the star system surrounding Xerion Prime. Shipping lanes, patrol routes, communication relay stations, and orbital defense platforms were highlighted in different colors. This facility isn't just entertainment infrastructure. It's a major hub in the collective's economic and military network, shipping coordination, financial transaction processing, fleet communication routing, strategic resource allocation, all managed from systems we now have access to. Kethvar felt his understanding of the situation shift again. You're not planning an escape. I'm planning a war. The cell fell silent, except for the sound of life support systems and the distant hum of the facility's operations. Every prisoner was staring at the human, with expressions ranging from disbelief to terror to savage anticipation. Consider the strategic implications, Marcus Chen said, its voice taking on the tone of a military briefing. Simultaneous coordinated strikes against collective infrastructure across 17 star systems, launched using their own communication networks and guided by intelligence they inadvertently provided. Economic disruption, military confusion, political chaos, all triggered from within their most secure entertainment facility.
The Vorthin's crystals were flickering so rapidly they created a stroboscope effect.
The scale of coordination required would be unprecedented. Multiple species, different technologies, incompatible communication protocols. Solve problems, the human replied, highlighting sections of its data analysis. Every species here uses quantum entanglement communicators for real-time coordination across interstellar distances. Every military here has standard operating procedures for joint operations. Every government here has existing protocols for responding to large-scale threats. Marcus Chen deactivated the display and looked around the cell, making eye contact with each prisoner individually. The only question is whether you're willing to discover what you're really capable of when you stop thinking like prisoners and start thinking like liberators. Kethvar had commanded fleets through desperate battles, made tactical decisions that determined the fate of entire star systems, led warriors into conflicts where failure meant extinction for entire civilizations. He understood warfare at scales that spanned light years and involved billions of combatants. But he had never conceived of anything like what this small, soft, seemingly fragile creature was proposing. This is beyond military operation, he said quietly. This is revolutionary warfare on a galactic scale. Yes, Marcus Chen agreed simply. It is. The casualties would be enormous. The economic disruption would affect billions of beings across dozens of civilizations. The political consequences would reshape interstellar relations for centuries. Yes, the human repeated. They would. And if we fail, every government represented here will face collective retaliation that could destroy entire star systems. For the third time, that simple, terrifying response, yes. Kethvar studied the human's face, searching for some sign of doubt, fear, or uncertainty. He found only that calm confidence that had disturbed him from their first meeting. Why? He asked. Why risk everything on something so ambitious it borders on insane? Marcus Chen was quiet for a long moment, and when it finally spoke, its voice carried harmonics that Kethvar had never heard from the creature before. Because sometimes, Commander, the greatest fear isn't the fear of death or failure or pain. Sometimes the greatest fear is the fear of discovering what you're truly capable of when everything else is stripped away. The human stood and moved to the center of the cell, its presence somehow commanding despite its physical limitations. Every being in this facility has been reduced to entertainment value, disposable resources for others' amusement, told that their worth is measured by how interesting their deaths might be. Its voice gained strength and certainty. But we are not entertainment. We are not resources. We are the survivors of 1,000 different worlds, the veterans of 1,000,000 different battles, the carriers of knowledge and experience that span the entire history of galactic civilization. Marcus Chen looked around the cell one more time, and in its eyes Kethvar saw something that made his 3 centuries of warfare experience seem like preparation for this single moment. And when we decide to stop playing by their rules and start writing our own, the galaxy will discover what it really means to be afraid. The human activated its device again, and throughout the facility, energy barriers began flickering and dying as 67 different species of warrior, soldier, and survivor found themselves free for the first time since their capture. In the command center, high above the arena complex, Arena Master Vox was experiencing something no member of its species had felt for over a millennium. Absolute terror. Because for the first time in the collective's history, the entertainment had decided to entertain itself. And across 17 star systems, quantum entanglement communicators began receiving coordinate packages and tactical updates as the greatest military minds of the galaxy prepared to teach their captors what fear really meant. Later, when historians tried to analyze the events that followed, they would mark this as the moment when warfare itself evolved beyond anything previously conceived, when the distinction between prisoner and liberator, entertainment and revolution, fear and courage, became meaningless in the face of something entirely new. But Kethvar, standing in that cell beside a creature that had redefined everything he thought he knew about power and possibility, understood it more simply. He had finally learned what it meant to fight beside humanity, and he would never be the same. It was in war beside humanity that I discovered what fear really means. HFY. HFY Sci-Fi.